Hello everyone, and a very spooky Halloween from your favorite demonic YouTuber. That is, of course, me, the Tona Makai, Master of Minds and of Men. This is a very special episode where I rank each story from worst to best from the very first 20 episodes of the Simpsons Treehouse of Horror. Now I know there are like 14 more episodes I didn't cover. I just thought I was at my limit with 20. I also like to leave some content to come back to. This is a totally subjective list, though, just my feelings and opinions. I know people have done this, like the fantastic The Real Gyms, but hey, I wanted to try my hand too. Now I'm just going to mention the story, what episode it's from, and a real brief reason why it's on that part of the list. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and let's get into it. This was a long time in the making. Let's start with the one and only honorable mention, and that's the wraparound for Treehouse 4, Bart's interpretation of Rod Serling's Night Gallery, show I love very much. It was very satisfying to watch. The pictures were more clever than they had any right to be. Now moving right along to numbers 60 to 50, we have our Worst Treehouse of Horror Episodes Ever tier. Number 60, Married to the Blob from Treehouse 17. Worst of the worst here, this exemplifies all the issues I have with teen season Simpsons, poor writing, lazy jokes, and of course, Dr. Phil McGraw, pointless celebrity cameos. 59, I've Grown a Costume on Your Face from Treehouse 16. Not a story, just a collection of lazy character designs. I mean that totally and completely uninspired. It might have been interesting if there was some effort put in, plus a ruin of a great Twilight Zone episode parody. 58, Frankenstein from Treehouse 14. Speaking of pointless celebrity cameos, this one only gets slightly higher than the Blob due to the fact Jerry Lewis isn't technically playing Jerry Lewis. The rest of it suffers from all the same bullshit. This was crap. 57, The Day the Earth Looks Stupid from Treehouse 17, a story I might have liked had there been a second act that made sense. It starts with Orson Welles and ends with an Iraq war joke. Pointless, a waste of another potential classic story parody. 56, Reaper Madness from Treehouse 14. I don't like Family Guy. I'm not a fan of Seth MacFarlane, not even slightly. Yet Family Guy did it better years earlier, and that had Norm Macdonald. A pale comparison. 55, Hell to Pay from Treehouse 9. I sincerely dislike this story. It's boring, it feels long, it's not funny, and frankly it marked what I thought was the beginning of the end of good Simpsons, and it did, at least for a period of time. 54, Whiz Kids from Treehouse 12. I'm not really a Harry Potter fan, it's fine. I just never super got into it. I've seen the movies, and I still feel this did a disservice to Harry Potter in just about every single way. 53, Hex and the City from Treehouse 12. What the hell is happening in this story? They took a simple man gets cursed by evil gypsy story and turned it into something utterly asinine and bordering on unwatchable. 52, There's No Business Like Mo Business from Treehouse 20. Does it deserve to be here? Maybe. It's a bit boring, doesn't really have any good jokes, and actually actively takes away from what was an excellent episode. So here you are, Mo. 51, How to Get Ahead in Deadvertising from Treehouse 19. A long intro that led to nothing, fairly vapid story, and was mostly set up for a gay joke that wasn't funny and seemed kind of in poor taste, to be honest. 50, The Bart Zone from Treehouse 2, the earliest one I disliked on this list, and this one might be met with some backlash. I don't like the Twilight Zone episode it's based on. I don't like the Simpsons interpretation of it. Both stories annoy me more than elicit any other response. So here you are. We move on to 49 to 40, the Boo Werns tier. 49, Ghost Dad from Treehouse 11. Probably the most generic story on this list. Totally and completely uninspired, but even then it's not quite as openly bad as ones in the previous tier. It's just there. I actually forgot about it until I went back and looked at what episodes I didn't have in my ranking. 48, 4 Beheadings and a Funeral from Treehouse 15. Another uninspired look that does the reference material of From Hell and Arthur Conan Doyle no respect. Lame jokes, confusing jokes, and a puzzling ending that makes this one hard to place anywhere else. 47, Easy Bake Coven from Treehouse 8. A story that could have more to say, but doesn't, and ends up being fairly mediocre, slightly rushed, and mostly forgettable. The only note on this is the caramel cob, which for some reason cracks me up every time. 46, Mr. and Mrs. Simpsons from Treehouse 18. Honestly, this isn't a horrible parody, just one that has little to do with Halloween, and despite a few murder jokes, is totally flat humor-wise. It would probably have been fine for the main series, but didn't land here for Halloween. 45, BI, Artificial Intelligence from Treehouse 16, a mediocre story that came from a mediocre movie. The flip-flopping of Bart being the outcast and not the robot was rather interesting, but I think a true showdown at the end would have been a lot better of a resolution than what we actually got here. 44, Bad Dream House from Treehouse 1, the first Treehouse story, and one that is almost too direct of a parody of its source material and fails to really engage with the humor, nor does the story ever kick into second gear, a humble effort. 43, If I Only Had a Brain from Treehouse 2, a really messy story that if they had tightened up the narrative and humor would have easily pushed this story ahead by a significant amount, but we didn't get that, so here it is. 42, Starship Poopers from Treehouse 9. By all rights, this should be much lower, but I'm a sucker for Maggie stories and Kang and Kodos. I liked the idea, I liked the concept, but the execution was totally off the mark, though I did kind of like the ending. 41, Desperately Zeking Xena from Treehouse 10. Futurama did this story much better, but I enjoyed seeing Doctor Who as well as Lucy Lawless did a good job in her role as Lucy Lawless. It was nice they gave the comic book guy something to do, I guess, and his death scene was pretty funny, but overall, a little bland. 40, Scary Tales Can Come True from Treehouse 11. The story is entirely saved by a handful of jokes that landed, because beyond that, the structure of the story was sloppy, at best, a confusing Brady Bunch the movie joke was out of place, but the ending at least had a resolution, I guess. For 39 to 30, we're in the Won't Someone Please Think of the Children tier. 39, Night of the Dolphins from Treehouse 11, only held together by the violence, the fact it parodies some Hitchcock and the ending. Beyond that, it's really a sloppy story, and dolphins are rapists. 38, Untitled Robot parody from Treehouse 19, a fairly standard Transformers parody, but it takes at least an interesting turn by the ending, has a few plot points in it that I am not sure mattered, and kind of felt like padding. 37, Survival of the Fattest from Treehouse 16, a story that I liked and would have loved to rank higher, but the addition of teen season Simpsons nonsense brings the whole thing down to here. Unfortunate. 36, E.T. Go Home from Treehouse 18, interesting enough take on E.T., though it's not as if we've never seen the evil E.T. story before, but it feels rushed and kind of overly silly. The ending with the aliens and their costumes, subsequent death, was alright though. 35, Monkey's Paw from Treehouse 2. Kind of surprised I ranked it this high, to be honest, but looking back, story that has some level of okay to it, as well as some interesting foreshadowing. Just feels kind of cold, separated, distant in its entirety. 34, Attack of the 50-Foot Eyesores from Treehouse 6. Another one I might catch flack for, as this one seems to be pretty popular. I just couldn't get into it. Its story was okay. Some of the violence was interesting, but ultimately it didn't really go anywhere with its own narrative, so it's here. 33, The Island of DR.HIBBERT from Treehouse 13, an incredibly poorly done parody that is only ranked this high thanks to a few jokes that really tickled me, namely the Marge sex scene, well, Homer's reaction to it, and the Flanders milking scene, but mostly the Flanders milking scene. 32, You Gotta Know When to Golem from Treehouse 17. Interesting concept that isn't really used in any way sans killing Skinner. Really, this story is saved by the voice acting of Richard Lewis, who was adequately awkward enough to make this a passable story. 31, The Terror of Tiny Toon from Treehouse 9. A story I like much more in concept than I do in execution, as the Simpsons kids meeting Itchy and Scratchy on their own terms has been something we've wanted since before the video games made it possible, but this is just an okay story. 30, Dial Z for Zombie from Treehouse 3. The first of two of the big zombie stories back to back. This one wasn't quite as well thought out, but gets even this high because of some of the classic jokes, most notably, you killed the zombie Flanders. He was a zombie? For 29 to 20, we are in the You May Remember These from Treehouse of Horror tier. 29, Don't Have a Cow, Mankind from Treehouse 20. The better of the two big zombie stories, this had better pacing, not quite as good jokes, but a much funnier resolution, so it beat out its much earlier companion by just that much. 28, I Know What You Diddly Italy Did from Treehouse 10, a story that would have been considered a pretty good parody had they not tacked on a really strange ending that hurt the overall delivery of the story. Has some really morbid humor that I enjoyed though. 27, Bart Simpson's Dracula from Treehouse 4. Expecting some shit from this one. I just think it's an overall sloppy story with a generic premise. It doesn't utilize the original outside of the first few jokes, then aimlessly wanders around for the remainder. 26, The Fight to Creep and Scare Harms from Treehouse 13, an incredibly silly story that only gets sillier as the story goes on, right up until the several time travel resolutions. I have nothing against this story, it just isn't good enough to be ranked any higher. 25, Fly vs. Fly from Treehouse 8. You know we are into stories that aren't bad, that are just not good enough to be considered great. This is definitely one of them, entertaining, silly, violent, just not quite better than ones we will be looking at. 24, The Raven from Treehouse 1. Okay, this one might be too high for some people, but I like that they did something a little bit different. They tried in that early going to mix things up, and frankly, the art in this story really grips me. I'm a fan of Poe, and I think they did him a real service here. It's not just anything more than The Raven, hence why it's here. 23, In the Belly of the Boss from Treehouse 15, the better version of If I Only Had a Brain, done much better and with some genuine humor. Stupid Homer was a little bit heavy-handed here, and the sexy Marge stuff was strange, but ultimately, this was alright. 22, The Genesis Tub from Treehouse 7, a fine story I know a lot of people love, but there isn't a ton of going for it, as not much really happens. It's essentially a bottle episode with a Bart-Lisa conflict, and it doesn't go much further than that, unfortunately. 1, House of Wax from Treehouse 12, a fun enough story that is really driven by Pierce Brosnan's excellent voice acting here. He is charming, helpful, and menacing, and it really pushes this decent story into much better territory. 20, The Thing and I from Treehouse 7. Dr. Hibbert getting a big role here was good, and he nails his part as quack cum half-competent doctor. Hugo was a nice reflection of Bart, and the mystery as well as resolution were all executed pretty well. For 19 to 10, we are in the perfectly cromulent tier. 19, Homer from Treehouse 6. More of a tech demo than anything else, but it's charming, heartfelt, and funny enough to work. Hasn't aged all that well design-wise, but it was a big deal back in the day, and it's still a pretty cool concept with an ending that leaves you kind of wondering. Number 18, The Omega Man from Treehouse 8. We're starting to get into the more well-done parodies, and this is a good start, because despite it being a well-done parody with an incredibly nihilistic Homer, it feels a little rushed, though that ending does make up for it. 17, Stop the World, I Wanna Goof Off from Treehouse 14. A very fun Bart Milhouse story that is a perfect example of their nonsense and toxic friendship, has some pacing issues, and the ending feels completely flat, but it's otherwise pretty entertaining. 16, Life's a Glitch, Then You Die from Treehouse 10, a hyper-topical story that references not only Y2K, but celebrities that were famous at the time. I think the strength of this story is you could kind of update it fairly easy with a new problem and a new set of celebrities and get the same quality of jokes. 15, The Ned Zone from Treehouse 15. Ned was a perfect person for this story, as no one else would have his level, head, and composure to not only want to change the future so he doesn't harm anyone, but to do the right thing. Just has some really sloppy jokes before the Homer stuff. 14, Hungry Are the Damned, Treehouse 1. Why is this so high? The introduction of who were at the time the Rigellians, a classic Twilight Zone parody, some Simpsons character work, and shaming them at the end. It's one I admire, even if it's not a classic. 13, King Homer from Treehouse 3. A King Kong parody is not something you usually relate to Halloween, but the pacing, the humor, and really getting into Homer as King Kong made this work in just about every way. It's just hindered by its own narrative. Number 12, Send in the Clones from Treehouse 13. Story I would have liked better had they tightened up the narrative a little bit, but it was funny, strange, violent, and ultimately stupid silly enough to work. 11, Nightmare on Evergreen Terrace from Treehouse 6. An excellently done take on the Freddy movies with Willie in place. This is one of my favorite jokes of all time in Milhouse Spaghetti Dinner's joke. It hurts by having some lulls in the story, as well as the art being inconsistent. Number 10, Dial M for Murder, or press pound to return to the main menu from Treehouse 20. Not only does this story look great, the animation has improved, as well as the black and white just works for it. It's a really nice combination of Hitchcockian lore and storytelling, and an unexpected gem for me in an episode that proved to be shockingly good. Finally, from 9 to 1, we are in the Steamed Hams tier. Steamed hams. Number 9, Nightmare Cafeteria from Treehouse 5. I've seen people rate this as a top 3, but I just can't do it as it's quite a rush story without any resolution. The resolution we get is funny, but I think it does take a little bit away from the story they were telling. But all in all, an excellent story with top-notch violence, Skinner being the cannibal, and Milhouse is killed, all positives for me. 8, Terror at 5.5 feet from Treehouse 4. I might could say that Nightmare Cafeteria and this could be interchangeable. They are both excellent stories, but I think I rank this one a little higher due to its Twilight Zone nature. The character work in this is just wonderful. We get to see Hans Mole Man getting killed, and Uter was a highlight. 7, It's a Grand Pumpkin, MILHOUSE, from Treehouse 19. I'm a big Peanuts fan, and this was absolutely a love letter to that series. From the animation, the music, even the characters walking. But they didn't just do that, they put a Simpsons spin on it. They were making fun of Milhouse, there was murder, and a strange ending that I would have liked to see more out of, but it is what it is. 6, Clown Without Pity from Treehouse 3. The Frogurt stuff alone gets this in the top 10, and I'm not kidding. That is some high-quality content. The story itself is also pretty alright, though fairly standard. The resolution of just flipping a switch was a great stroke of genius, however. Number 5, Citizen Kang from Treehouse 7. I'd take Kang or Kodos over any of the people that have been running for office in the past however many years. Hell, I'd take Clinton or Dole for that matter at this point. It just has so many great lines and is easily the best showing of the former Rigelians in the entirety of Treehouse. 4, The Shinning from Treehouse 5. The best movie parody the Simpsons have done. They nailed every single bit of this, and they changed enough to make it wholly their own. Homer and Riley are real standouts here, with an honorable mention to Grandpa, who gets a great reintroduction later in the episode. A superb story that is better than The Shining book, by the way. Number 3, Heck House from Season 18. I really love this story. I'm sure most people are surprised to see it this high, but it felt like, I don't know, a classic Halloween horror story I would like read as a kid. A bunch of kids decide enough is enough, terrorize the town, and are taken down by the devil. That's when I can get behind, and its execution was just on the mark for me. I gush over this story. Number 2, The Devil and Homer Simpson from Treehouse 4. Not only do we get the introduction of Devil Flanders, who we also see later in Heck House, but we get a lot of character work, not just from The Simpsons, but Lionel Hutz, Blackbeard, etc. It's a heartfelt story, but it also packs gore, morals, and lots of fun visuals that make this almost the best Treehouse story. And finally, number 1, Time and Punishment from Treehouse 5. Was there any real surprise here? I tried my best to find ones better than this, but I just, in good faith, cannot. It's the best Treehouse story of all time. It has action, adventure, horror, humor. This is Homer at peak Homer, dealing with all these different conflicts in his own way as they increasingly become more deranged. Even the resolution of him just saying, forget it, this is close enough, is so in line with his personality it's unreal. I have not seen the remaining Treehouse episodes, but it's highly doubtful they could top this even if they tried. Overall, well, that was an absolute haul, and it took me a shocking amount of time to put this together. You might not believe that, but believe me, I considered a lot of these very carefully because I apparently take The Simpsons way too seriously. I know maybe some people are disappointed with maybe the top 2, as they have kind of standard go-tos, but what can I say? Those stories are that good. They just are, and I was pleasantly surprised with some of those later episodes of Treehouse, as I dropped out of watching The Simpsons maybe around season 11 or 12. So while I was watching those teen seasons, I remember why I stopped watching. But once I got into the later teens and the early 20s, the show picked up a lot. It makes me think that maybe I was wrong about dismissing The Simpsons so outright. Maybe I need to go back and check out those later seasons I refused to watch. That's one of the reasons I'm glad I did this. Another being that I really love Halloween. It's mine and my daughter's favorite holiday, and I wanted to do something special for everyone out there in YouTube. I'm a tiny channel, but I hope something like this helps me grow. I thank each and every one of you for being here. I thank each and every one of you that got to this point in the video, and I hope you have an incredible Halloween. Please don't forget to subscribe, share this with people. I get no love on the algorithm. Add me on Instagram or Demon Peaks for daily Twin Peaks memes. Check out my Patreon where you can support this channel for as little as $1. And don't forget to check out my Bart Simpson's Treehouse of Horror comic ranking out today, right now as well. But please, come back next week, where for the month of November, I'll be looking at prison movies, starting with Cool Hand Luke. This has been Nitona Makai, Master of Minds and of Men, and goodbye.